I buried my mother on a Tuesday. By the following Tuesday, I had no idea I'd already lost my career too. I'm Rachel Moore, 38 years old, Senior Account Director at Halloway Brand Partners for 9 years. I built that title from nothing cold calls, weekend pitches, 14-hour days while other people went home. When my mom got sick faster than anyone expected, I took 2 weeks of bereavement leave. 2 weeks! I thought that was reasonable. I thought my job would still be there. It wasn't. My coworker, Greg Fenwick, a man I'd personally covered for more times than I could count, a man whose deadline I once fixed at 3 a.m. so he wouldn't get fired, had been quietly handed my 3 biggest accounts the day after my mother's funeral. Temporary, they told him. Business continuity, HR called it when I asked. I came back grieving, exhausted, raw, and found a stranger in my old chair, talking to my old clients like he'd built those relationships himself. My desk had been moved to a shared cubicle near the break room. Nobody apologized. Nobody even looked uncomfortable about it. The only person who seemed to actually care was Brianna Cole. Brianna worked in HR, 2 floors up, and she'd been my closest friend at that company for 6 years. She showed up at my desk every day with coffee and a kind word. Rachel, this is so unfair. I'm going to find out what's really going on up there. I trusted her with everything: my marriage, my frustration at work, my grief, everything. I didn't know yet that everything I told her was going somewhere else. The first crack came small. I mentioned to Brianna that Tyler and I had been arguing nothing major, just stress. 2 days later, Tyler brought up the exact same conversation, almost word for word. I told myself it was coincidence. Married 6 years, best friends for 6, of course things overlap. I didn't think about it again until I went through my mother's apartment. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was finally strong enough to sort through her things, her clothes, her photographs, the old flip phone she still used because smartphones gave her headaches. I turned it on just to find pictures of her before I had to give it up for good. My mother had never been good with technology, so years earlier I'd set up her phone myself and, without thinking much of it, looped it into our family cloud plan so her photos would back up automatically like everyone else's. That's when I found the sync. Tyler had linked his messages to that same backup years ago for some forgotten reason, and nobody had ever turned it off. Sitting in my dead mother's contact list, next to pictures of her garden and her 60th birthday, were 8 months of text messages between my husband and Brianna Cole. 8 months. I sat on my mother's bedroom floor and read every one. They were sleeping together since spring, and they were talking about me, about my job, about how stressed I'd been since the promotion fight. Tyler had been telling Brianna I should step back from my career for the sake of our marriage. Brianna had been feeding him things from inside HR leadership conversations, decisions, weeks before any of it became official. My best friend wasn't comforting me. She'd been studying me, helping my own husband build a case for why I should disappear from my own life. I didn't cry. I just sat there and felt something in me go very, very quiet. I went to my father next. Howard Pierce, 67, a Halloway board member for over a decade. The reason I'd gotten my foot in the door there in the first place. I told him everything, Greg. The accounts, the office. I expected anger on my behalf. Instead, he got quiet in that specific way I recognized from my entire childhood. Dad, did you know? He didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. I was in the room when it was decided, he finally said. I didn't think it was the right moment to create conflict. Not with your mother just gone. There it was, the pattern of my entire life in one sentence. I left that night and started planning. First, I needed to understand how deep this went, so I built the case the way I built every account I'd ever managed methodically. Paper behind every claim. Years ago, after watching a colleague get pushed out with nothing to show for a decade of work, I'd started writing personal service clauses into my client retainers. Not some grand contingency plan, just basic protection any director with sense builds in quietly, so it never has to matter. I never thought I'd need it. I just believed people should always have an exit that belongs to them. That instinct was about to save me. I told Tyler I was thinking about leaving my job entirely. I watched relief light up behind his eyes. He thought he'd won. I knew exactly what would happen next. Brianna would hear through Tyler and make sure it reached the right ears at Holloway. I let them think the trap was theirs. While they celebrated, I went to work. My old shared drive access hadn't been revoked, yet everyone assumed I was already gone. Buried in a folder labeled Q3 Transition Planning were emails between Greg and the VP of Operations, confirming my accounts had been earmarked for permanent reassignment 2 weeks before my mother even passed, while I was still home caring for her. They hadn't waited for an opportunity. My mother's death was just convenient cover. Then, I found the forward. Brianna had pulled a confidential memo about my upcoming performance review, a strong one, recommending me for director-level expansion, sent it to her personal email, then lied to Tyler that I was probably going to get passed over again, pushing him to convince me to quit. I had the memo. I had her forward. I had the timestamps. This wasn't gossip. This was a paper trail of deliberate sabotage, 2 floors deep into HR. I called Brianna before leadership. She deserved one honest conversation, even if I didn't owe her one. Why? I asked, in a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. She didn't bother lying. You had everything. Rachel, the marriage, the career, the way people just gave you things. Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed hard. I was tired of being the friend standing next to the woman everyone admired. I never had to give you anything, I said. You were already enough. You just couldn't see it. She had nothing for that. I left cash on the table for both coffees and walked out not for closure, but so that when I burned the rest of it down, I'd know I gave her one honest moment first. She didn't take it. 3 days later, I requested a private meeting with leadership. The room was colder than I expected. 5 executives, my father among them, all sitting with the stiffness of people who sensed something wrong, but couldn't name it. The VP of Operations thanked me for my continued professionalism and asked about my transition. Someone mentioned Greg had stabilized my old accounts. My father wouldn't look at me. I let the tension sit before I spoke. I'm resigning, effective immediately. Before you respond, I want to walk you through why. I laid it out piece by piece, the Q3 emails dated 2 weeks before my mother died, the forwarded confidential memo, the HR logs showing Brianna pulling my personnel file 3 times during my leave. Then, the retainer clauses. I watched the VP put his pen down mid-sentence as he did the math on the revenue, about to walk out the door. Legally, with nothing they could do to stop it. Brianna was terminated within the hour, this time without a severance conversation. Greg kept his promotion, but without me quietly cleaning up his mistakes. His numbers collapsed within 2 quarters. 2 of his largest accounts left by spring, citing inconsistent account management. He was demoted by summer, still there, in a smaller role, telling people he doesn't know what happened. Holloway didn't recover quietly either. Losing 80% of my book of business in 1 season isn't something companies bounce back from. 2 trade publications ran pieces about the exodus. And a major prospective client backed out of a 6-figure deal that fall after hearing how it had been handled. My father told me later the board spent an entire closed session discussing the Rachel situation, as if I were a line item instead of a daughter. That night, I sat Tyler down at our kitchen table. I didn't accuse him, I just played one voice message. The one where he told Brianna I was finally going to be out of the way at work. His face didn't even try to deny it. I slid divorce papers across the table, already filed 3 days earlier. My father didn't call the next morning. He didn't call for 3 weeks. When he finally showed up, he looked older than I'd ever seen him. I've spent my whole life avoiding rooms where I had to choose a side, he said, standing in my doorway, not asking to come in. I told myself it was peacekeeping. It wasn't. It was cowardice, and it cost you twice, once with your mother, once with everything after. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to hear it, without an excuse attached. It was the first time in my life I'd heard him apologize, without defending himself in the same breath. That's the first time you've ever said it like that, I told him. It doesn't fix it, but it's something. 60 days after I resigned, I opened my own consultancy with 80% of my old client base walking through the door behind me. Tyler moved out within the month. Brianna's name doesn't get mentioned in HR circles without someone lowering their voice. My father showed up to my office opening, holding a small plant and nothing else to say. I let him in. I stopped waiting for the people who failed me to become someone else. I just became someone they couldn't afford to lose twice.